Hey, I am Sarah. I'm so glad that you're here. Today's yoga practice is focused on meditation, and it's inspired by the scriptures. It's the Book of Mormon, Moroni chapters 7 through 9, and most specifically, Moroni chapter 7. And I'm going to share one of my most favorite verses as a tool for understanding the power that exists within each of us. And it's Moroni 7:13. He says, "That which is of God inviteth and enticeth to do good continually. Wherefore, everything which inviteth and enticeth to do good and to love God and to serve him is inspired of God." And then there's continuing language and understanding that just talks about the difference between those things that invite good and those things that don't invite good. And if it's not inviting good, it can't create a good result, or vice versa. If it is inviting good, then there isn't necessarily a net negative with it. And I love this framework for kind of understanding the mind. In a lot of ways, it's very parallel to truths that I've seen through yoga and truths that I've seen through studying our thoughts and feelings and the awareness that comes in that process, which is why this focus today is on meditation, because I really see meditation as a tool for hearing and creating some space in our minds. Just because we have a thought doesn't mean that it's true, nor is it one that we necessarily have to dwell on or create in actual life. And that's so freeing to understand that. But I think that in practice, it can also be really confusing because we're so often attached to that voice that's in between our ears. So meditation for me has been an extremely powerful tool, not to perfect that, but to strengthen that muscle. And just like we were gonna go strengthen our muscles with doing bicep curls and lunges, the more we do that, the more stronger that we get and the more capable that we are doing it. The same thing works with the mind. The more that we practice that muscle of the mind, the more that we are aware of that and the more that it creates space in everyday life. So with that being said, let's move into just a couple other phrases and thoughts that I wanted to share. And when we think about the mind and the thoughts that come in, it's important to remember that a negative thought does not create a positive feeling. And a negative feeling is not going to create a positive action. So if we're sitting in a space of should or judgment or comparison or expectation, it's probably going to produce some kind of a negative feeling, action, and ultimately result. And so that can be tricky to navigate, right? And as we step into a space of love, where we're letting go of judgment and comparison and expectation, where we're inviting ourselves into the present space, that's where we can take a positive thought, create those positive feelings, create those positive actions, and ultimately create those positive results. So something to just be mindful of as we create space in our minds for meditation. I'm going to set us up in one, and then I'll set us up in another one, just so you guys have a couple of options. One meditation pose that I really, really love is just being seated. And I have a blanket that has been folded. You could use a blanket, you could use nothing. You could use a block or a bolster, which I'll show in just a moment. I like a firm blanket. The really soft, squishy ones won't offer enough support. But we just take our seat on the very edge of this blanket, and then we let ourselves, in fact, I'll scoot this back just a little bit so you can see a firm really firm pillow would work as well. But we're just taking those sit bones onto the edge of it and then allowing our legs to fall open. This is a beautiful release in the hip flexor, especially. And it also helps the spine to lengthen without that pressure of trying to stay lengthened. So it really eases the space and position. From here, those hands just naturally falling towards the knees for grounding, or opening towards the sky for receiving, or maybe it's a little bit of each. Now, in this space, it's as simple as just breathing. And yes, there's beautiful meditations and apps and music and all of the things that we can add to it, but in a very simple form, just coming into our breath. And I love that the breath is always a tool to bring us back to the present moment, because we can do it anytime, anywhere, any place, and in any situation. We don't have to have an external environment controlled a certain way. So that's how I most often practice it. And maybe I'm in this great seated position, and maybe I'm standing in the kitchen or driving in the car, but just coming into that breath. And the breath that I go to the most is a 3-part breath. It's inhaling through the belly, the ribs, and the chest. And then I exhale from the chest, the ribs, back into the belly. And I'm putting my focus on the breath. So I'm thinking about inhaling, I'm feeling the body expand, I'm noticing whatever feeling or emotion I might be having currently, and I'm giving it a name. I'm not trying to change it or move away from it, but I'm just breathing into it. And that is an incredibly powerful tool. Inhaling from the belly, the ribs, and the chest, and then exhaling from the chest, the ribs, back into the belly. So this could be 3 to 5 breaths. This could be 20 to 30 breaths. Another beautiful space is in that Moroni chapter 7 there, well, 7 through 9, quite frankly, there's incredible phrases and words shared on those pages. And maybe it's just taking one of those words and bringing that to the front and center of the mind. And then using this breath, inhaling for 3 and exhaling for 3. All right, friends, my most favorite restorative yoga pose I want to share with you today. If you've seen my videos, you've seen it before, but it will never not be a favorite. So this is called a bolster. It's a really firm cushion. You can get them off Amazon. I highly recommend having one. Again, a blanket or a firm pillow work as well. And you can also do legs on wall, just using the floor and not adding anything to it. I like the additional elevated support that comes with this. So I take this, and it's not exactly against the wall, but it's got just a few inches of space between it. And then from this space, I'm actually going to sit myself on top of it, lay down, and then I'm taking just a gentle rotation. So as my legs come up, I'm rotating those legs towards the wall. And you'll notice I have socks on. I never wear socks in yoga unless I am hanging out and legs on the wall, because my toes get kind of cold. So this bolster, we don't want it in the arch of our middle back, which is where mine is just a little bit. So I'm gonna shift that bolster, and I want it on that tailbone space. So I'm feeling that nice space of the tailbone being supported, almost down by that sacrum. And I've got my legs up on the wall. Now, right now I have some distance between my legs and the wall, and I would like to scoot just a little bit closer. And this is where you get kind of a little creative. Maybe it's just an inchworm, taking us up a little closer. In hindsight, I could have done it just a little closer. So see, you just go with it. From here, where did the arms go? What did they do? So if you can see, I know we're kind of in this awkward space, but we'll take those arms like a goalpost, or even extend them completely. Some of us may even like them slightly elevated overhead. I prefer the goalpost. And then in this space, closing the eyes. And again, beginning with that 3-part breath, inhaling from the belly, the ribs and chest, and then exhaling from the chest, the ribs to the belly. Now, what if you notice your legs can't straighten against the wall? Beautiful alternative is just to bend the knees. This could even be done with support on a chair. And again, the space that we're trying to create here is space between the ears. So we just begin by noticing that we have thoughts. And then we notice that we can change or let those thoughts just flow right through. Meditation is not the elimination of thought, but it's simply noticing that there are thoughts, but we're not attaching or gravitating to any of them. And we'll notice often in meditation that we have attached ourselves to something and we've been thinking about it. As soon as we notice that we've been thinking about something, we come back to the breath and release it. And we'll notice over time that that muscle of noticing ourselves getting lost in thought can happen a little bit quicker and create just a little bit more space. Meditation is also different from sleep. And if we notice that we always fall asleep if we come into any kind of a restorative pose, that's also just a different training of the brain. So we actually can stay in that space with practice. But maybe we need that little bit of snooze as well, and that's just fine. So there's a space of training the brain. It doesn't have to be completely in a sleep state, and it doesn't have to be in a lost, consumed by thought state. So we're looking for that space in between where we hear and recognize those thoughts, but we're not attaching to any of them specifically. Legs on the wall can be done anytime. It can be done morning or evening or anytime throughout the day. The beautiful benefits of legs on the wall is that it offers a reset. So the blood is being forced to work in opposition to how it typically flows, but it also affects our digestive, our nervous, our autoimmune system, our nervous systems. So it can be both calming and energizing, just depending on which direction we're looking to reset. I would offer maybe trying to stay in this space for 5 minutes initially, and then work up in gentle increments, eventually up to a 20-minute time period. This can be a great tool for youth and children to reset their energy as well. So an opportunity to be mindful of those places and spaces of our bodies that might be talking to us a little bit. Noticing any areas that might feel tense or tight and allowing them to soften and release. The other urge that will come up is oftentimes our brain will be telling us that we need to be doing something. That's an interesting urge just to notice and remember that we are human beings, not human doings. And that a reset is essential for creating that space when we go to do with that much more capacity. The other urges that might come up from the brain could be telling us that we need to move on to something else. This isn't working. The brain will probably be pushing back with some kind of change from this current place. And it's just doing its job. This might feel new. And the brain loves to keep things comfortable and easy. So anything that's new, especially in meditation, it'll work to resist. We just notice that it's talking. And again, we just notice, create that space. All right, and if you are welcome to stay in this space even longer, but if you're moving along with me today, we can just begin by wiggling those toes, pulling those knees gently in towards the chest. Just giving ourselves a hug for a moment. Now, because we have been working the blood flow in opposition, it's important to give a few moments to recalibrate before we jump up to an upright position. So we'll work ourselves over to that side lying position, cradling the head. And then from here, working to a seated position. All right. Thank you so much for joining with me today, and we'll see you next week.